Hey guys, tonight we're setting off to ancient Greece. Sun-drenched, olive-scented, and thoroughly overdramatic. You're reclining beneath a marble archway, the cicadas humming, a warm breeze stirring your tunic. But wait, here comes Apollo, the golden-haired god of the sun, poetry, music, prophecy, archery, plagues, we'll gloss over that part, and extreme personal grudges. He gleams like a walking bonfire, all smug radiance and divine entitlement. You're sipping watered-down wine, half asleep, when he descends in a literal beam of light, shirtless as always, golden curls bouncing, lyre casually slung over his shoulder. He's got the face of an influencer and the temperament of a spoiled cat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling chatty, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow Apollo down a cobbled path flanked by olive groves. He's humming something suspiciously like Green Sleeves, even though that song won't exist for another 2,000 years. He gestures grandly toward the horizon. There, he says, my sacred cows graze, no mortal may touch them. You nod, half listening. The cows look fine, sleek, golden, majestic. Frankly, a bit smug themselves. They shimmer in the sun as if they've just been buffed with olive oil. See, Apollo has a thing about boundaries. And his cows? Absolute pride and joy. They're not just livestock, they're divine symbols. They glow, they moo melodically, and they're rumored to fart floral-scented breezes. Probably a fringe claim, but honestly, this is Greek myth. Weirder things have happened, and Apollo, being Apollo, doesn't ask people to respect his property. He makes it law, carved into temple stone, sung by oracles, woven into ancient lullabies. Don't touch the golden cows, or Apollo will dramatically ruin your life. Catchy. Still, not everyone listens. Historians still argue whether Apollo's obsession with the cows was symbolic of solar cycles or just another divine vanity project. But one thing's certain, you don't mess with the livestock of a god who literally drives the sun across the sky every day. That's peak celestial micromanagement. But Apollo, for all his cosmic clout, is also notoriously thin-skinned. Like seriously, someone once called his poetry derivative, and the entire city of Delos experienced a suspiciously localized drought. Coincidence? He wants devotion, and control, and admiration, and sometimes he just wants people to know he's better than them. So here you are, lounging on a sun-warmed stone bench, watching the god of music pace like a moody theater kid rehearsing a monologue. He's not technically angry yet, but you sense it brewing. Somewhere, a harp. String twangs ominously. He pauses, stares out at the glowing herd. They've been restless lately, he murmurs. I sense intrusion. You blink. Intrusion? What, like a sheep rustler? A curious traveler? A toddler who wandered too far? He narrows his eyes toward the distant hills. A mortal approaches, he says, voice like thunderclouds forming very slowly. A cowherd, ignorant, clumsy, wearing sandals. You resist the urge to say, so, like 90% of the population. Apollo doesn't do sarcasm. Or rather, he does, but only when he's the one delivering it via obscure riddles and passive-aggressive omens. The cowherd he's talking about? His name's Isius, no last name, just Isius. Probably smells like hay and hope. Doesn't even know he's about to become the central figure in a divine tantrum. Apollo strums his lyre once, and you swear the temperature rises. He'll regret it, he says. They always do. Now let's pause here, just briefly, to acknowledge that ancient gods were incredibly territorial. Zeus had his clouds, Athena had her owls, Dionysus had his wine-soaked cults dancing barefoot through the forest. And Apollo? He had glowing cows and a lifelong craving for being the smartest, prettiest being in the room. The sun begins to set. Apollo floats 6 inches off the ground, completely on brand. The moment he steps foot into my sacred meadow, he says, the story begins. And just like that, the light fades. You lie back, grass tickling your neck, a breeze carrying the smell of olives, sun-warmed leather, and very faint cow dung. Somewhere on the other side of this sleepy hill, a cowherd hums a folk tune and walks straight into destiny. Poor guy. You hear him before you see him. Soft footsteps through underbrush, the rhythmic clink of a herding stick tapping a rock now and then. Isius isn't in a hurry. Why would he be? He doesn't know a glowing, vengeful god is hovering nearby, scowling in a celestial huff. You stay low in the tall grass. Apollo, now practically invisible against the dying light, floats with theatrical stillness. His golden aura is dimmed, strategic brooding mode activated. His expression is the divine equivalent of someone watching their favorite mug being used. As a pencil holder, Isius whistles a few notes. They're off-key, but enthusiastic. His flock isn't golden or divine, just scruffy mortal cattle, brown and beige and vaguely annoyed. He's been wandering near Delphi for weeks, grazing from field to field, unaware of boundaries, sacred or otherwise. Honestly, in this terrain, it's hard to tell where divine land begins and where regular goat path ends. He steps into the meadow, the sacred one. Apollo stiffens. Somewhere, a dramatic lyre chord thrums. You barely restrain a yawn. Isius stops, squints at the landscape. His cows bleat in confusion. He scratches his chin. Nice grass, he mutters. That's it. That's the offense. Nice. Grass Apollo's left eye twitches. He whispers, that mortal complimented my sacred pasture, without permission. You're about to protest that it didn't sound like much of a compliment when Isius does the unthinkable. He lets one of his own cows mingle with Apollo's herd. The golden cows shift in unison, regal and unimpressed. They stare at the intruder like upper-class nobles confronting an uninvited peasant at a banquet. One lets out a long, melodic moo that might be a warning, or just opera. Now, fringe mythology fans might whisper about how these cows were semi-sentient, or celestial guardians in disguise. But it's more likely Apollo just really loved the aesthetic of livestock glowing under moonlight. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic of agriculture meeting divine order, or if Apollo just had cow-related control issues. Isius doesn't notice any of this. He plops down on a nearby rock, pulls out a crust of bread, and begins chewing. His own cows wander freely. Some begin to graze. One lifts its tail and, well, sacred meadow or not, nature does what nature does. Apollo's eyes blaze. He defiles the grass. He mocks the order of heaven. You raise an eyebrow. You've seen worse. Honestly, the last time Dionysus threw a party in this valley, someone set fire to a fig tree with a wine-soaked torch. This is just a picnic gone mildly astray. But to Apollo, it's a declaration of war. He doesn't smite right away. No. Apollo is a god of poetry and strategy, and really long passive-aggressive retribution arcs. Instead, he descends, gracefully, slowly, glowing just enough to ensure he's seen but still mysterious enough to be terrifying. Isius nearly drops his bread. Who trespasses upon my sacred land? Apollo intones, his voice echoing from somewhere, far above his actual mouth. Who mingles the sacred and the profane? Isius blinks up at him. I'm just herding. Sorry, didn't see a sign. Apollo's hair blows dramatically in a breeze that doesn't exist. You have desecrated what is divine. That cow, he points with a glimmering finger, licked the nectar grass of Helios's air. That one, Isius gestures at a perfectly ordinary-looking cow chewing slowly with a face like it's seen worse. The golden cows shift protectively. There is mooing. Tension builds. Isius stands, brushing crumbs from his tunic. I'll go. Didn't mean trouble. Cows don't know borders. Apollo's aura crackles. The gods do. This is where a reasonable deity might let it go. Warn the mortal. Put up a glowing fence. Maybe hand out a brochure. But Apollo demands an oath. Kneel, he says. and swear never to return. Renounce your herd, your land, your lineage if necessary, or face the fury of Olympus. Now that escalated quickly. Isius stares. You want me to abandon my cows? They are tainted, Apollo says with divine scorn, like someone rejecting a subpar bottle of wine. They have grazed among the chosen. You wait, expecting thunderbolts, flames, something. But Apollo just glows harder, and then, plot twist, Isius refuses. He doesn't yell, doesn't threaten. He just straightens his back and says, "No, they're mine. I raise them. I care for them. They're not perfect, but they're mine. And I didn't know this was your field." He adds, "Also it's grass, chill." It's the chill that does it. The sheer mortal audacity. Apollo's jaw tightens. "You dare?" Isius shrugs. "I mean, you didn't post a sign." Historians still argue whether this moment sparked a divine trial or just a really awkward shouting match. Some claim Apollo created a constellation that night, shaped like a stubborn cowherd. Others say he cursed Isius with eternal restlessness, never able to settle, always chased by golden hoofbeats in his dreams. But tonight, as the moon rises and the cows settle down under the olive trees, you watch Apollo hover in silence. Not attacking, not retreating, just shimmering, conflicted, almost impressed. Isius sits back down. He starts singing to himself. A simple tune, off-key and heartfelt. Apollo listens. Maybe this is the beginning of the feud, or maybe it's the end of something else, like blind obedience, or the idea that even gods can't be questioned. You lie back in the grass. The stars are sharp above. A cow snores, and the god of the sun, poetry, and unresolved issues floats silently over the meadow, glowing just enough to keep the darkness away. The morning sun doesn't so much rise as sneak in sideways, peeking through olive branches and dappling Isius's face in flecks of gold and green. You stretch where you've been resting among the grasses, brushing dew from your sleeves. A wee cow is chewing something suspiciously crunchy nearby, and Apollo is nowhere in sight, at least not visibly. You feel him, though, like the static before a summer storm. Not fury, not exactly. More like divine sulking mixed with a hint of righteous indignation. Somewhere the god of light is journaling in celestial calligraphy about respect issues. Isius yawns. He looks around, sees the golden cows mingling with his own again, and mutters, "Still here, huh? Guess the gods aren't big on eviction notices." He gives a half-hearted wave toward the sky, just in case. "Morning, Mr. Glowy." Nothing. No lightning, no booming declarations. Not even a passive-aggressive haiku scrawled in clouds. Instead, there's a rustle in the trees. A boy appears, about 12 years old, wearing sandals far too clean for someone who claims to be a messenger from nearby. He's got the polite smile of someone who knows they're delivering a letter sealed with divine wax and doesn't want to explain what happens if you ignore it. "Isius?" the boy asks. The cowherd nods slowly, chewing on a fig. "Who's asking?" "I bring a summons from Apollo. He would like to speak with you." Again. Pause. "Officially." Isius sighs. "Great. Is there going to be yelling?" "Probably," the boy says, shrugging. "But I hear he's composing something poetic this time." This is where things shift from awkward trespass to something almost formal. Apollo, it turns out, has decided that the insult of chill must be addressed via ritual. You don't just let mortals go around telling gods to relax without some performative consequences. So a meeting is arranged. Not a trial, not exactly. More like a dispute of celestial proportions, and it'll be held in the amphitheater of Delphi, under the gaze of oracles, minor gods, and at least 3 statues that will be watching far too intently for beings made of stone. You travel with Isius as he makes his way toward Delphi. The journey is slow, winding through olive groves and marble ruins, past goats who seem deeply unimpressed by the divine drama unfolding in their pastures. Villagers watch curiously but don't approach. Word's already spread. The cowherd who talked back to Apollo is being summoned for judgment. Now here's where it gets curious. According to fringe texts, scrolls so dusty even museum interns pass them by, Apollo didn't initially want to humiliate Isius. No, some believe he admired the stubbornness, that it reminded him of another mortal, or a sibling, or himself. Historians still argue whether Apollo's wrath was sincere or just part of a long con to extract a ballad-worthy apology. When you reach the outskirts of Delphi, the air changes. You smell incense. You hear chants in the distance, rhythmic and haunting. And you see the amphitheater, carved into the rock, a place where gods have whispered and oracles have screamed. It's empty, save for one glowing figure. Apollo sits on a marble throne that wasn't there yesterday. His robes shimmer in gradients of sunrise. His lyre is slung across his lap like a weapon. He doesn't stand as you approach. Isius stops a respectful distance away. He bows, barely. "You summoned me." Apollo speaks, and it's like honey, drizzled on thunder. "You mocked my sanctuary. You allowed beasts of earth to graze beside the sacred. You challenged the divine." Isius shrugs. "I didn't challenge. I grazed." Big difference. Apollo's jaw clenches. You use the word chill. A few doves scatter overhead, startled by the intensity of that syllable. "I meant no insult," Isius says, "but I won't beg either. I care for my herd. That's all I know. If they grazed where they shouldn't, it was from hunger, not malice. There's a beat. Long enough for you to wonder if this is about cows at all anymore." Apollo rises. "Then let us settle this the way of old, through contest, through song." You blink. "Song?" Isius echoes. Apollo nods. "You sang to your cows last night." "I heard it. A tune made not for praise, but for comfort. That is rare." Isius rubs the back of his neck. "I mean, yeah, they like it. Helps them sleep." Apollo lifts his lyre. "Then we shall duel. It's not a lightning duel, not a chariot race or a riddle game. It's a lullaby duel. Only in Greek myth would a god of music challenge a cowherd to a sleepy serenade battle under moonlight in a haunted amphitheater." You settle into a seat, barely restraining a smirk. Apollo begins. His melody is rich, layered, celestial. Notes bloom in the air like fireflies. Every chord tells a story of stars born in silence, of temples carved by sunbeams, of divine sorrow wrapped in gold. It's perfect. Maybe too perfect, so smooth, it forgets to feel. Then Isius strums a battered shepherd's pipe. It squeaks, badly, you wince. So does a nearby nymph, but then he hums. No words, just a low tune, warm and earthy. It wobbles like a tired wagon wheel. It drifts like chimney smoke. You realize it's not meant to impress, it's meant to comfort, to quiet. It sounds like the sound a child remembers when they can't remember their mother's voice anymore. Apollo watches. He doesn't smile, but he doesn't scowl either. He listens, really listens. When it ends, the amphitheater is silent. Then the god speaks, softly. "You sang for them, not for me. That is devotion I cannot command." Historians still argue whether this was a concession or a cryptic divine compliment. Fringe believers insist Apollo gifted Isius a strand of golden hay that night, one that would keep his cows healthy forever. Others say Apollo just wandered off humming that mortal tune, pretending not to be moved. But you saw it. You felt. It's sometimes defiance isn't loud, sometimes it's a lullaby, and sometimes the gods listen. You linger in the quiet that follows the lullaby duel, not quite sure if what just happened was a divine compromise or a celestial mic drop. Apollo's form fades slowly into the soft glimmer of twilight, like a candle reluctantly snuffed out. One last chord from his lyre echoes off the amphitheater walls before silence settles in. Heavy, reverent, oddly satisfied. Isius exhales like he's been holding his breath for the past 3 days. He pats his shepherd's pipe, gives it a thankful nod, and says to no one in particular, "Well, that went better than expected." You're not entirely sure whether better means he survived or that the cows won't be turned into constellations by morning. Either way, he's still standing, and that's more than most mortals get when they square off with a god who once turned a guy into a laurel tree just for running too fast. You head down from Delphi with Isius winding back through the mountain paths. He seems thoughtful, less scared. Like maybe for the first time he realizes his story has legs, maybe even wings, or at least hooves. Back in the village, the golden cows are grazing peacefully again, as though nothing ever happened. They still glow faintly at night, though, enough that some of the villagers whisper about Apollo's lanterns. Children leave tiny wreaths near their hooves, half in reverence, half in hopes the cows will grant them luck in their geometry. Exams. But things don't exactly go back to normal. First, there's the problem of the bards. They show up in droves, strumming lyres and scribbling frantically on scrolls. "You're the one who sang against Apollo?" they ask, wide-eyed, as if expecting Isius to suddenly float or sprout a halo. He doesn't. He mostly mutters something about sore throats and walks away. Then come the scholars, digging into dusty lexicons to reinterpret what just occurred. Was this a symbolic conflict between divine control and mortal agency? Was Apollo testing the musical soul of humanity? Was it, some ask, a cosmic reminder that cows deserve better acoustic accompaniment? Historians still argue whether the lullaby duel marked a new period of mythic philosophy, one where mortals briefly could stand toe-to-toe with deities, armed only with sincerity and a slightly off-key melody. And it's not long before other gods get involved. See, the thing about gods, especially the Greek ones, is that they're deeply competitive. Not just in war and love, but in aesthetics, mood, and who can throw the best divine tantrum. When Hermes hears that Apollo actually listened to a mortal's lullaby, he's intrigued. He what? Hermes asks, already packing snacks. Hermes is a god of boundaries, between the mortal and the divine, between wakefulness and dreams. So naturally, a sleepy cow serenade is very much his brand. He visits Isius under the cover of night. Appearing in the flicker of a lantern, Hermes doesn't knock. He just materializes, sitting on a barrel, balancing a pomegranate on one knee. "Nice tune," he says casually. Apollo's still humming it. Isius squints. "Do I need to sing again?" Hermes grins. "Nah, I'm not here for duels. I'm here for possibilities." Now here's where things take a turn into territory that mainstream myths never quite sorted out. Some scrolls refer to this chapter of Isius's life as the journey of the gentle voice. Others call it the cowherd who whispered to Olympus. But fringe scholars, they go a little deeper. One obscure papyrus suggests that Hermes offered Isius a deal. Not immortality, not riches, but something subtler. The ability to drift between dreams. To walk the edge of slumber and leave behind melodies that would soothe not just cows, but anyone seeking peace. "You've got something rare," Hermes says, now dangling upside down from a fig tree. Not defiance, not pride, just quiet, persistence. That's dangerous in the best way. Isius doesn't quite understand. He just wants his cows to stop glowing at night so the wolves stay confused. But he listens, and over time the village begins to notice odd things. Children sleep better after hearing Isius hum in the distance. Arguments at the market stall seem to resolve faster when he's nearby. Even storms skirt the valley occasionally, as if unwilling to disturb whatever ancient lull is wafting through the olive groves. There's a scholarly theory that this wasn't magic at all, but coincidence, layered over mythology, a suggestion that collective belief amplified a regular shepherd into something more. Historians still debate whether the godly attention truly changed Isius, or whether it simply revealed what was already there, a man deeply attuned to the rhythms of peace. One rainy evening, Isius disappears. No drama, no thunderclap, just gone. His hut remains. The cows do too, older now, slower, but still faintly golden. Some say they wander to the mountaintops each spring, looking for him. Others say he visits them in dreams, humming the same tune that once made a god pause mid-verse. As for Hermes, he leaves a single silver coin beneath Isius's pillow. One side bears a lyre, the other, a sleeping cow, curled beneath a crescent moon. Even now, tucked inside the most obscure mythological compilations, Isius appears not as a hero, not as A martyr, but as something much more mundane and somehow more potent. A reminder that the gods don't always reward the loudest, that sometimes they favor the ones who simply don't flinch. And somewhere, in the realm between dream and story, Apollo still hums a melody that isn't his, but he keeps it close anyway, just in case. You linger in the quiet that follows the lullaby duel, not quite sure if what just happened was a divine compromise or a celestial mic drop. Apollo's form fades slowly into the soft glimmer of twilight, like a candle reluctantly snuffed out. One last chord from his lyre echoes off the amphitheater walls before silence settles in. Heavy, reverent, oddly satisfied. Isius exhales like he's been holding his breath for the past 3 days. He pats his shepherd's pipe, gives it a thankful nod, and says to no one in particular, "Well, that went better than expected." You're not entirely sure whether better means he survived or that the cows won't be turned into constellations by morning. Either way, he's still standing, and that's more than most mortals get when they square off with a god who once turned a guy into a laurel tree just for running too fast. You head down from Delphi with Isius, winding back through the mountain paths. He seems thoughtful, less scared. Like maybe for the first time he realizes his story has legs, maybe even wings, or at least hooves. Back in the village, the golden cows are grazing peacefully again, as though nothing ever happened. They still glow faintly at night, though, enough that some of the villagers whisper about Apollo's lanterns. Children leave tiny wreaths near their hooves, half in reverence, half in hopes the cows will grant them luck in their geometry. Exams. But things don't exactly go back to normal. First, there's the problem of the bards. They show up in droves, strumming lyres and scribbling frantically on scrolls. "You're the one who sang against Apollo?" they ask, wide-eyed, as if expecting Isius to suddenly float or sprout a halo. He doesn't. He mostly mutters something about sore throats and walks away. Then come the scholars, digging into dusty lexicons to reinterpret what just occurred. Was this a symbolic conflict between divine control and mortal agency? Was Apollo testing the musical soul of humanity? Was it, some ask, a cosmic reminder that cows deserve better acoustic accompaniment? Historians still argue whether the lullaby duel marked a new period of mythic philosophy, one where mortals briefly could stand toe-to-toe with deities, armed only with sincerity and a slightly off-key melody. And it's not long before other gods get involved. See, the thing about gods, especially the Greek ones, is that they're deeply competitive. Not just in war and love, but in aesthetics, mood, and who can throw the best divine tantrum. When Hermes hears that Apollo actually listened to a mortal's lullaby, he's intrigued. He what? Hermes asks, already packing snacks. Hermes is a god of boundaries, between the mortal and the divine, between wakefulness and dreams. So naturally, a sleepy cow serenade is very much his brand. He visits Isius under the cover of night. Appearing in the flicker of a lantern, Hermes doesn't knock. He just materializes, sitting on a barrel, balancing a pomegranate on one knee. "Nice tune," he says casually. Apollo's still humming it. Isius squints. "Do I need to sing again?" Hermes grins. "Nah, I'm not here for duels. I'm here for possibilities." Now here's where things take a turn into territory that mainstream myths never quite sorted out. Some scrolls refer to this chapter of Isius's life as the journey of the gentle voice. Others call it the cowherd who whispered to Olympus. But fringe scholars, they go a little deeper. One obscure papyrus suggests that Hermes offered Isius a deal. Not immortality, not riches, but something subtler. The ability to drift between dreams, to walk the edge of slumber and leave behind melodies that would soothe not just cows, but anyone seeking peace. "You've got something rare," Hermes says, now dangling upside down from a fig tree. Not defiance, not pride, just quiet, persistence. That's dangerous in the best way. Isius doesn't quite understand. He just wants his cows to stop glowing at night so the wolves stay confused. But he listens. And over time, the village begins to notice odd things. Children sleep better after hearing Isius hum in the distance. Arguments at the market stall seem to resolve faster when he's nearby. Even storms skirt the valley occasionally, as if unwilling to disturb whatever ancient lull is wafting through the olive groves. There's a scholarly theory that this wasn't magic at all, but coincidence, layered over mythology, a suggestion that collective belief amplified a regular shepherd into something more. Historians still debate whether the godly attention truly changed Isius, or whether it simply revealed what was already there, a man deeply attuned to the rhythms of peace. One rainy evening, Isius disappears. No drama, no thunderclap, just gone. His hut remains. The cows do too, older now, slower, but still faintly golden. Some say they wander to the mountaintops each spring, looking for him. Others say he visits them in dreams, humming the same tune that once made a god pause mid-verse. As for Hermes, he leaves a single silver coin beneath Isius's pillow. One side bears a lyre, the other, a sleeping cow, curled beneath a crescent moon. Even now, tucked inside the most obscure mythological compilations, Isius appears not as a hero, not as a martyr, but as something much more mundane and somehow more potent. A reminder that the gods don't always reward the loudest, that sometimes they favor the ones who simply don't flinch. And somewhere, in the realm between dream and story, Apollo still hums a melody that isn't his, but he keeps it close anyway, just in case. There's a strange calm that follows revelation. You've probably felt it yourself, after a long cry, a sudden insight, or one of those 3 a.m. existential spirals where you somehow land on a truth so basic it feels cosmic. That's where Isius is now. Except instead of crawling back into bed, he's wandering the foothills of Thessaly with a satchel full of scrolls Athena insisted he borrow. Not that he can read most of them. One scroll hums when you touch it. Another smells like cinnamon and thunder. A third one, he swears, changes size depending on how loudly he sings nearby. Still, life resumes, sort of. He returns to his cows, who greet him with a certain reverence, like they know he's seen things. Or maybe they're just hoping he remembered to bring snacks from Olympus. And while he tries to settle back into his old rhythm, herding, whistling, dodging the occasional divine riddle, the world has other plans. You see, the gods might be immortal, but they're not immune to gossip. Word of the cowherd's journey into the gate of thought spreads like spilled wine on marble. Now everyone wants a piece. Enter Hermes, god of speed, commerce, travel, and really unnecessary flair. He shows up unannounced, perched backward on a donkey, juggling figs and reciting market prices in 5 dialects at once. "Isius!" he cries, hopping off and landing with an infuriating amount of grace. "You, my tunic-wearing savant, are a hit. Olympus is buzzing. Even Hades peeked above ground to ask who you are." Isius blinks. "Do you want something?" "Oh, I always want something. But today, I bring an opportunity." Now, when Hermes says opportunity, you should probably hide your valuables. He proposes a tour, a divine performance circuit. Isius would travel to the sacred sites, Delphi, Eleusis, maybe even Knossos if the Minotaurs have cleared the stage, and perform his melodies. Not just for entertainment, mind you, but for divine inspiration exchange. Whatever that means. Think of it, Hermes says, eyes glittering. A mortal bard turned oracle, unlocking ancient truths through tone. You'll be like a philosophical boy band, with cows. To Hermes' surprise, Isius doesn't laugh. He just looks tired, and maybe that's the point. After everything, he doesn't want to entertain. He wants to understand. But curiosity wins, because this isn't just about music anymore. It's about the people who hear it. And so begins the tour of thought. Each city offers a new puzzle. In Delphi, Isius plays a melody that causes the oracle's tripod to hum in response. In Eleusis, his low tones make the stone walls glow faintly blue. In Rhodes, a group of skeptical philosophers fall asleep mid-lecture, only to wake up claiming they'd dreamt of their childhood kitchens, complete with the smell of stewed lentils and parental disappointment. Everywhere he goes, the pattern repeats. Something intangible begins to stir. People remember things they didn't know they'd forgotten. Tears are shed for reasons they can't explain. One soldier lays down his spear mid-performance and simply walks away. Nobody stops him. The mainstream accounts chalk this up to group hysteria. Music-induced autosuggestion, they say. A spiritual placebo. But that theory has its holes. For instance, in Corinth, a blind child insists she saw threads of light dancing around the notes. In Lesbos, a flock of birds synchronizes flight patterns with the tempo of Isius's flute. And in one small fishing village, a dying woman requests his song as her final rite. She passes with a smile, muttering something about the river maid of sound. Still, not everyone's thrilled. Religious leaders begin to feel uneasy. After all, Isius offers no scripture, no altar, no dogma, just music. And that's dangerous, because people start listening to him in ways they no longer listen to priests. So they do what uneasy institutions have always done when faced with ambiguity. They label it heresy. The High Temple of Hera issues a statement. Flowery language, dense metaphors, but the gist is clear. No mortal should access divine resonance without supervision. They summon Isius for clarification. Hermes, ever the opportunist, shrugs. Told you to stick to merchandise, singing. Cows are harder to monetize. And yet, even facing accusation, Isius doesn't waver. He shows up to the hearing with his flute, a few scrolls, and no lawyer. The temple chamber is vast, cold, and mostly filled with men in robes who haven't smiled since infancy. They demand an explanation. He gives none. Instead, he plays. No speeches, no miracles, just a single melody, soft as dusk and wide as memory. Halfway through, one elder begins to cry, quietly, ashamed. By the end, nobody speaks. The charges are dropped. Not because he's exonerated, but because no one knows what to write in the scrolls. How do you record a melody as a defense? Historians still argue whether this event marked the start of a religious shift or simply a poetic footnote. Some claim it influenced later Orphic mysteries. Others say it's a fabrication, a posthumous myth to justify early tonal philosophy. The fringe believers, they're convinced the melody Isius played was actually a key, a frequency that untangled the emotional wiring of whoever heard it. A form of soul maintenance, if you will. But the truth? It's probably somewhere in between the tears and the silence, which ironically is exactly where Isius lives now. Not as a god, not as a rebel, but as a tone that lingers in places logic can't reach. Somewhere along the sun-bleached coast of the Peloponnesus, where salt hangs in the air like old secrets and olives seem to grow from rocks more than soil, you find yourself drifting with Isius once more. He's walking slowly these days, not out of fatigue. Though let's be honest, cowherds aren't known for ergonomic footwear, but because the pace of the world has shifted. He listens more than he speaks now, to the wind, to footsteps, to people, especially to people. His melodies have softened too, less about revelation, more about reflection. Think fewer lightning bolts, more overcast afternoons where you remember someone's laugh and don't quite know why you miss it. But just as he's learning to be still, the gods, because of course they do, stir the pot again. This time it's Apollo. Yes, that Apollo. God of light, logic, healing, plague, poetry, the lyre, the sun, prophecy, and, according to at least one sarcastic marble carving, all things smug and radiant. He's been watching from Olympus, not literally. That's more Hera's style. Apollo prefers a polished reflective basin and a glass of something fermented, and what he sees bothers him. Not the fame. Gods expect that from mortals with divine connections. Not even the melodies, some of which, honestly, remind him of his early work before the muses made him go mainstream. What really itches under Apollo's perfectly moisturized skin is that Isius plays from feeling, not formula. You see, Apollo has spent centuries codifying music, intervals, rhythms, structures. The Pythagorean system? He takes credit. He believes the cosmos runs on clean, predictable harmony. The music of the spheres? That's his band. So when some cowherd starts stirring up crowds with gut-wrenching melodies no one can reproduce or explain, it feels offensive. like someone performing surgery with a wooden spoon and getting better results. He sends a message. Not directly, of course. Apollo has decorum, and an ego the size of Crete. Instead, he arranges a contest, public, formal, with judges. Think ancient Battle of the Bards, but with higher stakes and fewer ironic beards. Isius receives the invitation on a scroll so shiny it reflects his confusion back at him. The seal bears Apollo's unmistakable lyre and sun motif, which basically screams, "I don't need to prove myself, but here I am anyway." The terms are clear. Each contestant must perform 3 pieces, 1 improvisation, 1 interpretation of a known hymn, and 1 original composition. The winner receives, well, nothing tangible, just affirmation, and maybe the gods' respect, which in divine circles is like getting a nod from a cat, rare and possibly accidental. Isius, predictably, doesn't want to go. He's not a performer, he says. He doesn't compete. His music is for resonance, not ratings. But then he thinks about the people who followed him from town to town, whispering afterward that something inside them moved. That they finally remembered a dream. That they cried without shame for the first time since their father left. That their nightmares paused, if only for a night. Maybe it's not about Apollo. Maybe it's about showing the world that feeling is structure. That intuition is just another kind of order, one with heartbeats and memory. So he goes. The contest is held in an open amphitheater near Ephesus, the kind of place where every echo sounds like fate clearing its throat. The audience is a weird mix. Philosophers, priests, farmers, nymphs, at least 1 retired demigod, and 2 skeptics who wrote a joint scroll titled, "Why Music Cannot Alter the Mind, But We're Coming Anyway." Apollo arrives last, floating in on a sunbeam like he's late for his own coronation. He's radiant, of course, literally glowing. Birds rearrange their feathers to impress him. Someone faints. It's a whole thing. He nods at Isius, but says nothing. The contest begins. Apollo performs first. His improvisation is flawless, mathematically, crisp, melodically complex, and so emotionally detached you feel like you've just read the terms and conditions of a lullaby. The crowd claps politely. Several scribes take notes. A goat starts chewing on its own foot in mild despair. Isius steps up. He doesn't announce himself, doesn't bow, just lifts his flute and plays. It's quiet at first, barely audible, but slowly, like mist curling. Around stone, the notes fill the space, not loud but deep, like the air itself is remembering. And then something strange happens. The amphitheater begins to resonate, not with sound but with feeling. Every stone seems warmer. The audience shifts, not to applaud but to breathe slower. A woman starts laughing for no reason. A child presses their ear to the ground and whispers, "It's humming." Apollo frowns. The second round is interpretation. Apollo selects an old Delphic hymn, something about divine order and seasonal crops, and delivers a performance so perfect, even the statues nod in approval. Isius, in contrast, chooses a forgotten harvest song from a northern village. No one's heard it in generations. Half the lyrics are mumbled memories, but he doesn't sing it at the crowd. He includes them. Humming grows into harmony. The audience becomes the chorus. When the round ends, someone in the front row starts crying and doesn't stop until they're gently escorted away by a satyr with a blanket and some grapes. Now the final round, original composition. Apollo unleashes something dazzling, a tapestry of notes that loop through golden modes and sacred ratios. It's breathtaking, cold, precise, like staring at constellations and realizing they don't care about your taxes. And then it's Isius's turn. No announcement, just breath and a tone. This one doesn't climb or impress. It settles, it nestles into rib cages, curls around old wounds, dusts off abandoned joys. At one point, a sleeping dog sighs and rests its head on a philosopher's lap. Historians still argue whether Isius's final melody was divine, psychological, or just lucky. Some claim it mirrored the brain's theta rhythms, inducing collective meditation. Others think the amphitheater was rigged. Fringe theorists swear that Apollo stopped glowing, just a flicker, when the last note faded. The judges don't declare a winner. They can't. Apollo nods once and leaves. No words, no blessing, but no protest either, and that says more than any laurel crown ever could. After the contest, the amphitheater slowly empties, like a tide retreating from the shore. People drift away in a kind of hush, the kind usually reserved for holy places or very satisfying naps. No one quite knows what they witnessed. Was it a performance, a miracle, a celestial awkward family dinner disguised as music? You trail behind Isius, who seems surprisingly unfazed by the entire ordeal. He walks barefoot, of course. His sandals fell apart somewhere near the warm-up area, and he didn't bother fixing them. There's a leaf stuck in his hair. It might have been there the whole time. The sun is low, stretched thin across the hills, and for the first time in days, there's no flute in his hand. He's silent, not brooding, just untuned. Like his inner string has gone slack. Even cowherds need recovery time after accidentally redefining what music is and challenging a god on stage. Eventually, he stops near a stream, the kind that meanders like it's half asleep. There, seated on a rock that looks far too smooth to be natural, is a woman in a pale blue tunic. She doesn't introduce herself, doesn't need to. You recognize her energy before she opens her mouth. Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, the one who keeps Homer's stories flowing and ensures the Iliad isn't just a long grumble about stolen women and wounded pride. She watches Isius with an expression that's equal parts curiosity and mild exasperation. The same look in art. Teacher might give a student who's painted a masterpiece using expired yogurt and some lint. Well, she says, that was bold. Isius shrugs. I didn't mean to win. You didn't, she replies smoothly. You reminded people why music matters. Different thing. Calliope isn't angry. Muses rarely are. They're too busy prodding mortals into creating beauty with inadequate tools. But she is intrigued. She pulls a small object from her sleeve, a lyre miniature made of something translucent and shifting like frozen moonlight. This belonged to a mortal once. He gave it up when he forgot how to listen. She offers it to Isius, but he hesitates. I'm not a bard, he says. I'm a cowherd, Calliope smiles gently. Exactly. He takes the lyre, and at that moment, the stream behind him hums, just faintly, like it's in on the joke. You watch as Isius cradles the instrument, not like a weapon, not like a prize, more like a question he's just realized he needs to answer. For days after, he doesn't play. Instead, he listens. To wind under roof tiles. To bees hovering over thyme. To laughter from balconies. To the deep, creaky exhale of ancient doors opening too slowly. The world, he realizes, is full of unfinished songs. He begins walking again, village to village. But now people meet him differently. Not as a mystery or a traveler, but as someone who has seen a god blush and didn't brag about it. Children follow him, sometimes with makeshift flutes or twigs they pretend are harps. They ask about the contest, about Apollo, about the song that made a goat faint. He tells them small truths, the kind you have to squint to understand, like, the best music is what happens when you forget you're trying. Or, most gods are just very old emotions wearing nice shoes. One evening, as the sky leaks lavender across the horizon, Isius stumbles upon a village square where a group is rehearsing for a festival. Their music is earnest, loud, slightly off-key. There's a triangle player who's clearly just here for snacks, but they're laughing and dancing, and no one seems to care that they're doing it wrong. He smiles. Later that night, after the fire pits have burned down to ember chatter and the stars are blinking in tired Morse code, he pulls out the lyre Calliope gave him. It still feels strange in his hands. Too elegant, too sacred, but he plays anyway. Not a full song, just a phrase, a ripple of tone that makes the crickets pause, mid-verse. A woman nearby sighs. What's it called? He shrugs. I don't know yet. Somewhere on Olympus, Apollo. Glances sideways, because he hears it too. See, this is the thing about gods. They're not all-knowing. They listen because they have to. Mortals make the echoes that last, and Isius, cowherd or not, has become an echo that won't fade. Now, let's zoom out just a little. Historians still argue whether this tale even happened. Some claim the contest was allegory, a metaphor for intuition versus intellect. Others think Isius was invented by wandering minstrels looking for a folk hero who wasn't also a demigod with anger issues. Fringe scholars swear by a manuscript fragment found in a wine jug near Delos, which mentions a boy with the voice of rivers and the pride of moss. Naturally, no one takes it seriously, except maybe you, because here you are, hearing it again. And maybe, just maybe, that's proof enough. But back in the story, Isius continues, with his odd rhythms and silent stops and melodies that don't always resolve. He's not trying to impress anymore. He's just trying to remember the music before the world forgot it, and every so often someone hums along without knowing why. You wake the next morning. Well, not wake, really, because you weren't asleep exactly. More like swimming slowly through the shallow end of consciousness, just in time to find yourself in the back of a cart. The cart creaks in that charmingly untrustworthy way that only wooden wheels over ancient stone can. You're surrounded by goats, again. Life has a way of keeping its favorite metaphors close. Isius sits up front, reins loose in hand. He's humming, not performing, just letting little bits of sound flutter out like sleepy birds. You get the sense the tune isn't for anyone but the cart itself. And maybe the goats. You're headed toward Delphi. Yes, that Delphi. Home of the oracle. Center of the world. If you believe enough maps drawn by people who never left the village. The journey is long. Long enough that the weather changes twice and a pelican briefly joins the caravan, only to leave when it realizes there's no seafood. But Isius isn't rushing. See, the thing with becoming something mythical is that you don't have to announce it. You just keep moving, and the stories catch up. When you finally reach the mountain pass into Delphi, there's a moment, a real hush, as the landscape rearranges itself into something theatrical. The rocks lean inward like they're trying to hear. The sky forgets how to be blue and just becomes sheer light. And the wind? It stops pretending to be casual. This is an entrance. And here, waiting like it always knew you were coming, is the Temple of Apollo. It's somehow both enormous and understated. Classical minimalism, if you will. Marble columns doing their best to look humble while silently screaming, "We invented architecture." There are priests at the gate, but they don't stop you. They stop Isius. Politely, yes, but firmly. He's not surprised. They don't like me much here. You don't need to ask why. See, rumor has reached Delphi. The contest, the song, the god who blinked. Word travels fast when it's set to music. Isius doesn't argue. Instead, he nods at you and says, "You go. Wait, what?" But he's already turning away, heading toward a nearby olive grove, leaving you alone in the holy vestibule of one of the world's oldest knowledge centers, surrounded by people who believe prophecy is just well-phrased anxiety. Inside, the air shifts, cooler, heavier, like walking into the breath of a very old, very quiet animal. A voice guides you through stone corridors. Not mystical, just a tour guide. She points out famous inscriptions like "Know thyself" and "Nothing in excess." Basically ancient Twitter. And then you meet her, the oracle. She's younger than expected, pale, calm, eyes like still water after something heavy sank beneath. You don't speak, she does. There's music in your steps, she says. Not yours, but close to you. You nod, because obviously, she continues, the god isn't angry, he's confused. Honestly, same. She reaches into a box beside her, pulls out a small disc, clay, inscribed. She hands it to you. This is not for you. It's for him. When he's ready. No context, no manual. Just ancient ambiguity in its purest form. You return outside to find Isius asleep under the olive tree. A goat is chewing his sleeve. It's kind of sweet, in a rustic hallucination kind of way. You place the disc in his bag. Quietly, he doesn't wake. You sit beside him. For a while, neither of you speaks, because sometimes prophecy just needs a nap. Later, when he does wake, he doesn't ask what happened. He doesn't need to. He just picks up the lyre again, plays a note. Then two. It's not a song yet. More like a memory trying to form a sentence. And that's when something strange happens. The ground beneath you trembles. Not violently, just enough to say, "Hey, I'm here." A breeze lifts, spiraling down from the mountain like it's applauding gently. And you hear it, far away, faint but clear. A flute. Not perfect, not divine, not demanding worship, just trying. Historians still argue whether Delphi ever allowed musical visitors to access the oracle. Officially, the temple wasn't a performance venue. But there's a niche school of thought that believes certain melodies were allowed as offerings, especially those that carried sorrow. And fringe scholars point to old temple graffiti. Yes, ancient graffiti existed. Where someone scratched, he sang, and even the stones leaned closer. Isius doesn't know any of this. He just knows something opened. Not a door, not a heart, but maybe a rhythm. And for the first time in days, he smiles without looking tired. You wonder where you'll go next. Because with this boy, this strange wandering melody disguised as a person, you don't stay still for long. But tonight, Delphi holds you both gently, and the stars, those ancient gossipers, blink brighter, because something is happening, and even the gods can hear it now. The next morning, if you can call that slate-gray yawn of light a morning, you and Isius descend from Delphi. The path is narrow, flanked by gnarled cypress trees that all look like they've seen things and decided to remain unimpressed. Isius hums again, but it's different now. Less idle, more directed. Like his thoughts are forming lyrics behind his eyes, and the melody is taking the lead. You're quiet, mostly because you're still carrying the psychic weight of having met an actual oracle. Also because there's a goat tailing you and it feels rude to speak over it. A few hours pass, maybe more. Time bends when you're walking through lands that belong to myths more than maps. Eventually the terrain flattens. You reach a fork in the road. One path leads east, toward the coast. The other, southwest, toward the Peloponnese. Isius stops. We go that way, he says, nodding toward the coast. You don't ask why. You've learned better. But you're curious, so he offers. Someone there used to know my songs before they belonged to me. Cryptic, poetic, and thoroughly unhelpful. Classic Isius, the journey turns humid. Cicadas buzz like tiny chainsaws in the trees, and the air gets that sticky quality that makes you question the wisdom of tunics as a fashion staple. You finally reach a town, not a large one, just a collection of whitewashed homes, a crooked temple, and what appears to be a shrine made entirely of seashells and optimism. But the real centerpiece, an amphitheater, old, cracked, but unmistakably built to carry sound in every direction. Isius walks straight to it, as if gravity prefers it that way. No one stops him. A few kids trail behind. One of them is holding what looks like a busted tambourine. Another drags a sheep on a rope. The amphitheater fills, not because anyone announces a show, but because gossip is faster than Hermes when it's about music and mystery. Isius takes the center. He closes his eyes, and then he doesn't play, not at first. Instead, he speaks. "This is a song I stole," he says, and then it stole me. Now he plays. The melody starts low, familiar almost, like something you once heard from your mother's breath when she thought you were asleep. It builds, not fast, just deep, like roots deciding which stone to grow around. And the crowd falls silent, even the sheep, even you. And then you hear it. Another sound, not lyre, not voice, flute, from somewhere behind the stage, a high, unsure note, like it isn't quite certain it wants to exist yet. Isius pauses, nods, continues. The flute joins, wobbly, offbeat, like a baby deer on stilts, but it stays, and slowly, impossibly, it learns the tune. Together, they make something not quite harmonious, but entirely real. A duet of tension and apology. This isn't a battle. It's a negotiation. And in the crowd, you notice someone standing, tall, cloaked, unmoving. He wears no wreath, no glowing eyes, no thunderbolts. But you know who it is. Apollo, no fanfare, no fire, just watching and listening. Now, here's the thing. Historians still argue whether Apollo ever manifested physically to mortals outside of myth. Officially, gods didn't do matinee appearances, but fringe scholars point to strange entries in temple records, attendance lists signed with impossible names, or strings of poetic hexameter where accounting should be. And there's a fringe legend from this very town that claims the god once stood beneath their cracked proscenium and said nothing at all. But his silence changed everything. Today might be that day. The song ends. No applause, just wind. Isius doesn't bow. He looks up, past the crowd, toward the cloaked figure, and he says, "It wasn't perfect." The figure doesn't speak, just vanishes. Not theatrically, like a breath being exhaled from a throat you didn't know was holding it. The crowd begins to murmur. Some clap, some wander off, pretending they didn't just witness something celestial. In flip-flops, you sit. Your hands tremble slightly, because for a moment, just a moment, the line between myth and memory blurred, and your name might be somewhere in the footnotes. Later, as you help Isius pack his lyre, he says, he heard it. Not just the song, the apology. You ask, do you think he forgives? Isius shrugs. I think he feels. And somehow that's more terrifying, because now the god isn't just a statue or a metaphor or a constellation. He's real, and real things are complicated. That night, you both camp just outside town. No goats, no audience, just stars. And somewhere, not far, a flute practices its scales. The next morning, if you can call that slate-gray yawn of light a morning, you and Isius descend from Delphi. The path is narrow, flanked by gnarled cypress trees that all look like they've seen things and decided to remain unimpressed. Isius hums again. But it's different now. Less idle, more directed. Like his thoughts are forming lyrics behind his eyes, and the melody is taking the lead. You're quiet, mostly because you're still carrying the psychic weight of having met. An actual oracle, also because there's a goat tailing you and it feels rude to speak over it. A few hours pass, maybe more. Time bends when you're walking through lands that belong to myths more than maps. Eventually, the terrain flattens. You reach a fork in the road. One path leads east, toward the coast. The other, southwest, toward the Peloponnese. Isius stops. We go that way, he says, nodding toward the coast. You don't ask why. You've learned better. But you're curious, so he offers. Someone there used to know my songs before they belonged to me. Cryptic, poetic, and thoroughly unhelpful. Classic Isius. The journey turns humid. Cicadas buzz like tiny chainsaws in the trees, and the air gets that sticky quality that makes you question the wisdom of tunics as a fashion staple. You finally reach a town. Not a large one, just a collection of whitewashed homes, a crooked temple, and what appears to be a shrine made entirely of seashells and optimism. But the real centerpiece? An amphitheater, old, cracked, but unmistakably built to carry sound in every direction. Isius walks straight to it, as if gravity prefers it that way. No one stops him. A few kids trail behind. One of them is holding what looks like a busted tambourine. Another drags a sheep on a rope. The amphitheater fills, not because anyone announces a show, but because gossip is faster than Hermes when it's about music and mystery. Isius takes the center. He closes his eyes. And then, he doesn't play, not at first. Instead, he speaks. "This is a song I stole," he says. "And then it stole me." Now he plays. The melody starts low, familiar, almost. Like something you once heard from your mother's breath when she thought you were asleep. It builds, not fast, just deep. Like roots deciding which stone to grow around, and the crowd falls silent. Even the sheep, even you. And then, You hear it. Another sound, not lyre, not voice, flute from somewhere behind the stage, a high, unsure note, like it isn't quite certain it wants to exist yet. Isius pauses, nods, continues. The flute joins, wobbly, offbeat, like a baby deer on stilts, but it stays, and slowly, impossibly, it learns the tune. Together they make something not quite harmonious, but entirely real, a duet of tension and apology. This isn't a battle, it's a negotiation, and in the crowd, you notice someone standing, tall, cloaked, unmoving. He wears no wreath, no glowing eyes, no thunderbolts, but you know who it is. Apollo, no fanfare, no fire, just watching and listening. Now, here's the thing. Historians still argue whether Apollo ever manifested physically to mortals outside of myth. Officially, gods didn't do matinee appearances, but fringe scholars point to strange entries in temple records, attendance lists signed with impossible names, or strings of poetic hexameter where accounting should be, and there's a fringe legend from this very town that claims the god once stood beneath their cracked proscenium and said nothing at all. But his silence changed everything. Today might be that day. The song ends. No applause, just wind. Isius doesn't bow. He looks up, past the crowd toward the cloaked figure, and he says, "It wasn't perfect." The figure doesn't speak, just vanishes. Not theatrically, like a breath being exhaled from a throat you didn't know was holding it. The crowd begins to murmur. Some clap. Some wander off, pretending they didn't just witness something celestial. In flip-flops, you sit. Your hands tremble slightly, because for a moment, just a moment, the line between myth and memory blurred, and your name might be somewhere in the footnotes. Later, as you help Isius pack his lyre, he says, he heard it. Not just the song, the apology. You ask, do you think he forgives? Isius shrugs. I think he feels. And somehow that's more terrifying, because now the god isn't just a statue or a metaphor or a constellation. He's real, and real things are complicated. That night, you both camp just outside town. No goats, no audience, just stars. And somewhere, not far, a flute practices its scales. You wake with the unmistakable feeling of having been observed, not in a sinister way, more like a librarian who watched you sleep in the reading room and kindly didn't wake you. There's morning mist hanging in the trees, and Isius is all ready, making some kind of breakfast that looks like it regrets being born. You sit beside him, and neither of you mention the grove. It's understood that some things are like dreams, precious and fleeting. Repeating them out loud only makes them thinner. But before you finish chewing whatever this chewy root-based meal is, Isius blurts out, I think I know where the cowherd went next. And boom, you're off again. Apparently, the next chapter in this mythological goose chase involves something called the House of Windless Echoes. You don't ask how he knows that. You've stopped asking. His information seems to come from some combination of myth fragments, inherited gossip, and dreams he pretends are just naps. The House of Windless Echoes sits near a cliff's edge, and getting there involves about 4,000 stairs, all seemingly carved by an angry person who hated knees. The stairs go up and then sideways for a bit just to mess with you, and then up again. Eventually, panting and coated in your own sweat like some sort of mythological glazed donut, you reach it. It's small, which feels rude to say, but really, this place is more like a large birdhouse than a house. A one-room stone structure with no roof, no windows, and no echoes. You test it. You shout, hello. Nothing bounces back. Just silence. That's not normal. Isius smiles. Told you. Now, here's where we dip our toes into one of history's weirder ponds, ancient acoustics. The Greeks were masters of sound. Theaters like Epidaurus were designed with such precision that you could hear a whisper from the stage in the back row. But some structures did the opposite. They ate sound. Archaeologists still debate how or why some temples or chambers seem acoustically dead. Some think it's design, others say it's accidental. And the fringe folks? Oh, they say it's metaphysical, that these places were built to silence the gods themselves. to muffle divine tantrums or capture forbidden knowledge in a mute jar. Standing in this room, you feel it, that deep, unsettling quiet. You clap. Nothing. You hum. The sound doesn't travel. Even your breath seems dampened. Isius pulls out a scrap of parchment and hands it to you. It's a drawing, a spiral, half incomplete. Last place the cowherd was seen, he says. According to a source that doesn't exist anymore, you stare at him. So, we're following invisible clues from imaginary sources to find a man who maybe argued with Apollo about cows? He grins. Exactly. You try speaking a full sentence in the chamber. Why does this place not echo? Nothing. And then, barely. Perceptible, a hum. Not your hum, something lower, older, vibrating below the threshold of hearing. You and Isius lock eyes. He mouths, "Don't move." Too late. You already have goosebumps. Then, as quickly as it began, it stops. The air is still again, and then comes a voice. Not a supernatural one, just a very human one, from behind you. Looking for someone? You spin. There's a woman, standing at the edge of the chamber. She's got gray hair tied back in a scarf and an expression that says she knows more than both of you combined but won't charge extra for it. Isius recovers first. We might be. She steps into the chamber, and unlike you, her footsteps make no sound. Everyone comes here eventually, she says, looking for answers, or quiet, or sometimes just because the wind tells them. You have questions. All of them. She cuts you off with a look. I knew the cowherd, she says. Sort of. I knew his daughter. Bam. Plot twist. Turns out the cowherd wasn't alone in his exile. He had a daughter, a quiet girl with a voice like wind chimes and a talent for drawing spirals. They lived in silence for years, speaking only when necessary and never singing. But the girl did draw. Symbols, spirals, maps of places no one had been. And one day, she left. Alone. No one knows where she went, only that she walked into the forest, with ink-stained fingers and a broken lyre slung over her shoulder. The woman sighs. She said the gods had stopped listening, so she would find someone else who would. Then she hands you something. A small wooden token, carved with, you guessed it, a spiral. She wanted this to be passed on, to someone who asked the right kind of questions. You and Isius exchange a glance. You're not sure what kind of question you just asked, but apparently it was the right kind. As you leave the chamber, you test your voice again. Hello! Still no echo. But inside you, something resonates. You're not sure what the token does or what it means, but you're sure of one thing. The cowherd's feud with Apollo wasn't just about cows. It was about silence, about being heard, and maybe, just maybe, it was never his feud to begin with. The token doesn't hum, glow, or do anything overtly magical, but it feels heavy. Not in weight. No, it's light as a cork. But in that strange, abstract way, certain objects seem to carry meaning too large for their size. Like a wedding ring. Or a museum label that says, last known piece. You carry it with a kind of reverence as you and Isius descend from the house of windless echoes. The stairs somehow seem longer this time, or maybe your knees have given up all hope. Where to now? You ask, mostly to keep your brain from leaking out through your ears. Isius pulls a familiar face, half smirk, half shrug. We follow. The spiral. And yes, of course, that means returning to Delphi. Because where else do spirals end, if not in the belly of the world? As you travel back through groves and over ridges, your mind wanders. You think of the daughter, of the drawings, of a girl leaving behind silence to chase sound in a world of gods who no longer listen. And somewhere in there, you begin to understand something uncomfortably real. The myth was never about Apollo's pride or the cows. It was about agency, voice, echo, being seen and not forgotten. When you arrive at Delphi, it's twilight. The light is golden, lazy, indifferent. Tourists would have gone home by now had they existed in this timeline. But you and Isius are alone, walking through the ancient stones like ghosts with too much context. You reach the old oracle's chamber. It's not as grand as you imagined. A sunken, cracked room with scattered remnants of ancient architecture, and a faint smell of mineral water, possibly sulfur, possibly sweat, hard to say. Isius gestures to the navel stone, the omphalos. You remember this from a museum placard somewhere. The omphalos was considered the center of the world. Literally, the Greeks believed Zeus sent two eagles flying from opposite ends of the earth, and they met here, like a very dramatic GPS signal. And now you're here, token in hand. You approach the stone and feel the ground shift slightly under your feet, just enough to notice, just enough to tell you, something old is paying attention. Put it there, Isius says softly, pointing to a shallow depression in the stone's base. Let it listen. You place the spiral token into the hollow. Nothing happens. Then, something tiny, a vibration, not of the ground, but in your chest, as if someone far beneath you is speaking in whale song, and your bones are the tuning fork. You close your eyes, and you see, not a vision, exactly, more like an idea wearing a costume. You're standing in a clearing, not in Greece, not anywhere. Real, but in the conceptual space myths live in when they get tired of metaphors. The cowherd is there, older, still angry, but it's the quiet, bitter kind of anger now. Apollo stands opposite him, not radiant, not furious, just tired. They're not fighting, they're listening. Between them, the daughter, drawing spirals, on a flat stone with her finger, whispering things you can't hear but can almost understand. A truce? A transfer? You're not sure. But it ends with the girl holding a lyre of her own. She strums a note. It's not perfect, but it echoes. And in that moment, Apollo smiles. Back in the real world, if we can call it that. You open your eyes. The token is gone. In its place, an inscription. The sound returns when the silence learns. Isius breathes out. She did it. You look at him. She ended the feud? He shakes his head. No. She rewrote it. Which, if you think about, it is a way of ending it. Historians still debate the identity of the daughter of the cowherd. Some claim she was a forgotten demi-goddess, a folk invention. Others say she was a symbol, a feminine balance to Apollo's harsh rationality. And a few, the most fringe of all, suggest she was real. A girl born mute who taught the world to listen with its eyes instead of its ears. As you leave Delphi, you feel lighter. Not metaphorically, like genuinely less gravitational pull on your body, which is suspicious. You glance at Isius. Are we dreaming again? He raises an eyebrow. Still? You both laugh. Or at least your mouths do the, bright shapes, and the sound echoes this time. Echoes like a bell in a canyon, like someone returned your voice after a long vacation. That night, you set up camp near a stream, the kind of stream that sounds like background noise on a meditation app. You sit beside it, let your fingers trail through the water, and for once, there are no questions clawing at the back of your brain, no cryptic old women, no spirals, no grumpy gods. Just you, a trickle of water, and a story whose ending finally stopped running. Well, almost. Because just before sleep takes you, a flicker of thought interrupts the peace. If Apollo's feud wasn't really his, then whose was it? And if she rewrote the ending, who's writing the next part? You wake to the smell of figs, not roasting, not drying in the sun, just there, as if someone carved the concept of fig into the wind. You sit up slowly, spine protesting like a cranky bureaucrat on a Monday, and glance around the streamside. Camp. Isius is gone. Typical. You rise, stretch, and find something folded beside your bedroll. A note. No ink, no signature, just impressions in the fibers. As if someone pressed the words in with a stylus made of thought. It says, "You'll need the lyre." Right. The girl's lyre. The one you saw her strum in that unplace. The one that echoed back even though it shouldn't have. You turn around and of course it's waiting by the stream, crafted from pale wood. The strings shimmer faintly like dew in moonlight, though it's morning. When you lift it, it feels familiar. Not in the "I've touched this before" sense, but more like, this belonged to a part of me I don't normally talk to. You sling it over your back, mostly because you can't not, and begin walking. The path isn't clear. It never is at this point in a myth. But your feet seem to know something your mind doesn't. The countryside shifts around you in small, impossible ways. Trees blink out of one arrangement and reappear a few paces later in a new one. A goat passes by, humming something suspiciously close to a disco tune. You don't ask questions anymore. That phase died 3 days and 6 surreal epiphanies ago. Eventually, you arrive at a hill. It doesn't look important, which is precisely why it's probably the most important place in the story. At the top, there's a circle of standing stones, shorter than Stonehenge, more casual in their mystery. And at the center, a figure. You recognize him instantly, the Cowherd. Only, he's not old, not young either. He's everyone he ever was. You approach slowly. He doesn't move, just watches the clouds, hands behind his back, a calm frown pulling at his lips. You clear your throat. "I think this belongs to you," you say, gesturing to the lyre. He shakes his head without turning. "No, it never did." Silence for a long beat. Then he speaks again. "It was always hers. She just used my story to build it." You blink. "You mean your daughter?" Now he turns, and his face changes. Flickers between hundreds, thousands, men and women, young and old, mortal and divine, cowherds and kings, poets, oracles. You. "She was never just one voice," he says. "She was every voice that couldn't shout loud enough to be heard. Every quiet rebellion." You grip the lyre a little tighter. He nods toward it. "You're the last echo of the old feud. One more retelling before it settles into legend for good." You hesitate. "What am I supposed to do?" He smiles. "Play." And so you do. At first, you're terrible. The strings feel too alive, like they're judging your posture and remembering all the times you quit piano lessons. But slowly, sound begins to form. Not melodies exactly, but moods. Tones that recall breezes and arguments and quiet questions asked under bedsheets. The kind of music no one claps for, but everyone remembers later when they think they're alone. The cowherd closes his eyes. The stones around you begin to hum, not literally, but perceptibly, like they're resonating with the long-forgotten possibility that this story could end differently. Historians often argue whether this moment, this hilltop communion between myth and meaning, was part of any real ancient narrative. Some say it was added by medieval monks who wanted to soften the crueler edges of Greek tragedy. Others claim it was an oral fragment from a pre-Olympian cult, where the gods were less glamorous and more relatable. And a fringe theory? That this hill is real, and people sometimes find it in dreams when they're ready to forgive something they've forgotten they resented. The cowherd speaks once more. Every time someone tells this story, it chooses a new ending. Make this one kind. You nod, and play one last note. The hill sighs, the stones quiet, and the lyre vanishes. You're alone now, but it doesn't feel like loneliness, more like space, room for something new. A blank page, but a gentle one. As you descend the hill, the world seems less defined. Edges blur. Time softens. You step into the forest, into the in-between, into the place where stories rest between retellings, and you realize it's over. Not with a thunderclap, not with a final battle, not with some god learning a big lesson about humanity and issuing a rebrand. Just a note, played softly, fading into air. You never find Isius again. Not really, but every now and then, when you pass a fig tree, or hear laughter from a goat pen, or glimpse a spiral scratched into a bus. Stop bench, you wonder if he's still out there, pointing travelers toward the long roads, whispering half-truths and whole metaphors, making sure someone else picks up the lyre when the story needs telling again. And you go home. Not the home with walls and keys, The other one, where silence hums gently and the stars blink back without judgment, where myths rest their heads and dream of being misunderstood again. You don't walk back. Not really. You just arrive. One moment you're stepping through underbrush. The next your foot lands softly on warm stone. The air smells faintly of sea salt and laurel leaves, and the world feels paused, like it's listening in. You're in a courtyard, low columns, faded frescoes, and the sleepy hum of cicadas thick in the background. An old temple, or maybe a noble house from a time when gods still crashed weddings and mortals still dared to insult them. You sit on a bench that's been smoothed by centuries of stories. You're not alone. Across from you sits a woman with a veil, not to hide, but to protect something sacred. You know this instinctively, the way you know not to interrupt a child singing to themselves. She's stitching something into a piece of linen, but there's no thread, just light. She glances up. "Well," she says, "you've returned." You nod. "I think." She tilts her head. "Did he forgive the god?" You take a deep breath. "I don't think he needed to." She smiles. "Good answer." The cicadas get louder. You shift, suddenly aware of the weight you've left behind. The echoes of anger, the momentum of myth that's finally run out of fuel. For the first time, you feel empty in a good way. Like a bottle poured out at just the right time. "So what happens now?" you ask. She shrugs. "Most myths don't have now. Only again." You think about that. The veil flickers for a moment, and you catch a glimpse of her face. Part Apollo, part Artemis, part someone who's lived too many lifetimes but still remembers the smell of olive oil on a warm afternoon. "You've done your part," she says. "You took the long route. You carried the tune." You look at your hands. They're still humming slightly, like the strings of the lyre etched themselves into your bones. Not painful, just present, like the memory of sunlight on water. "And the others?" you ask. "The people in the stories?" She threads the needle of light through the linen, shaping a curve. A crescent, a lyre, a grin. "They sleep." You nod. The courtyard fades slowly, not vanishing, just becoming less urgent. The way dreams retreat in the morning, confident you'll be back. You stand, stretch, and step through the archway ahead. No destination, just movement. As you walk, the lines between things blur again. The past stops insisting on being separate from the present. The gods stop shouting. The mortals stop performing. Everything just is. A road appears, old flagstones covered in moss. You follow it. Along the way, you pass markers, a tree carved with symbols you almost recognize, a cairn built from singing stones, a feather the size of a sword embedded in the ground like an offering, and finally, a door, not a grand one, just wood, iron hinge, and a faint smell of cedar. You open it. Inside, a room, familiar, yours, but not quite. The kind of space memory builds for you when your brain is too tired to be precise. A bed waits, sheets folded back as if someone knew you were coming. You sit on the edge, and for a long time, you just breathe. The world doesn't need anything from you right now. No revenge, no victory, no clarification. The feud's done. The god and the cowherd. They were never meant to agree, but they shared something. A stubbornness that shaped the stories we tell. And now, maybe, those stories can rest. You lay back. The ceiling ripples gently, like waves far below the surface. One last thought passes through your mind before the quiet truly settles. Maybe myths don't end. Maybe they just change tempos. And, with that, sleep. Wind down. 300 words. You're still here. Your body, soft and warm under the covers. Your breath, deepening in time with the gentle hush of the room around you. There's nothing left to figure out tonight. No puzzles to untangle. No fates to dodge, no gods to impress or outwit. just the faint echo of a lyre string, barely there, whispering that all is calm, and you did enough. Let your muscles soften now, like wax warmed by a slow flame. Let your shoulders sink, your jaw loosen, your hands rest open. Nothing to hold, nothing to chase. Out there, the world continues. Winds travel across hills that remember every footstep. Stars blink in patterns that don't need your attention just yet. The stories will be there tomorrow, if you want them. But for now, drift. Drift on the river of this quiet moment. Float through the long, winding echo of myth and meaning. Let your mind fade gently, like ink in water, until the edges blur and the noise dissolves. No more hills to climb tonight. No more names to remember. Just rest. And maybe, if the dreams are kind, you'll find yourself back in that courtyard again, with the smell of laurel in the air and a story waiting just behind. A veil of light, sweet dreams.